I wanted to ask all of you, journalism was, in some ways, you could argue, the most successful thing of, Western occupation of Afghanistan for the last 20 years. You were innovative, you were creative, you were entertaining, you took risks. It was always a joy to think about the kind of journalism and television that was being carried out in Afghanistan. It was terrific, and it is the biggest loss, in my view, after August 2021. Can you keep it alive in the West, with Zan, with Amu TV, with projects through the Intercept? I have heard that the Taliban is already reaching out to some of you and will put text on your phones that says, I know where your mother lives, I know where your brother lives, if they're in Kabul. And so the larger question is, can they reach you, the Taliban, here? And can you keep what you have done alive? I just want to remind our attendees, if you have a question, please put it in the chat and you can ask it. Zahra, so can I call you Zahra John? That is a nice honorific right at the end, right? So do you think that you can keep Afghan journalism alive from here? Are you supported enough? Do you have enough resources? Can you send back to the country the kind of information that people by this time must be hungry for?
Thank you for that question, Deborah. If I'm being honest, the question of funding is always difficult for the people who work on the newsroom and not on the boardroom. So if you don't have the language, the experience, the network, everything, so of course you're left out and it would be on your own. That is one part of the question, which is like a very important part, which we lack, of course, most of as media in Afghanistan, especially the media that are trying to survive in exile, are struggling. However, what I want to see is that us coming together, as trying to work shoulder to shoulder to support the people inside the country, and trying, first of all, to bring the story that's happening in Afghanistan. This is very, very difficult. We are talking about a population who left out without any protection. So imagine for women in Afghanistan, I'm just giving like this suffering is on the whole population of Afghanistan, as we get the number that say like 98% of the population don't have enough to eat. So those kind of numbers really show like the level of suffering that everybody's go through it. However, how that's difficult for women in Afghanistan is they are being, particularly for the fact of being women, they are under attack from the Taliban. So for us to be able to tell the story of women in Afghanistan, especially at this time, is very, very important. And it's also a personal struggle for us, because we want to tell this story for the next generation. We want to be able to preserve parts of what women in Afghanistan are doing in the face of the most misogynist political forces ever. Especially now, there's no country in the world that deny women the right to education that the Taliban does. So how do really women live in this country is a big question. Like when, like I cannot even imagine because I am living in a country that I do have all forms of freedom. That by itself is the fact that you can really feel there's one part that you are ordered to not go to school, to not go to work, to stay at home. And there is one big void is that there is no purpose, there is no hope. We have a recent Gallup survey that says 98% of women and 97% of men do not have hope for the future. Like they see their future as suffering, at getting even worse. So when we are seeing this, that there is so much happening inside the home that you don't really get to know, get to hear in the media. So we are really hoping to be able to preserve that stories. There is struggling, there is, difficulties, but there's will to do this work. And we are a group of, collective of mainly women journalists. We came together. Most of us are working voluntarily. We are putting our time, our energy, our experience, knowledge, trying to support each other. And I see this as a positive way of trying, trying to survive. It's a way of survival at this difficult time for us. And I feel that we will survive because we are trying to work together. We are trying to get each other's hand and push for it. Like when I talk to my colleague in Afghanistan, most of them are women. One of my colleagues is actually, she's pregnant. She's becoming a mom soon. And when I talk to her, like she say like, oh, I do this, I do that. I know this is the difficulties. And I will say, like, it's okay. Like sometimes a story, which might be very risky, we are not going to tell it. But at least there's other stories that you can bring, that you can tell, especially your own story, that you can still work, even if that means not leaving your house, even if that means not being able to get the credit that you deserve for your work. But you're still working, that there is still a hope. So I just want to quote one of my colleagues. She's very young. She lived in a province that told even before the Taliban, there was no journalism being taught in that entire province. So she always wanted to become a journalist, but wasn't able to study journalism in university. And then Zan Times, our media, became a platform for her. We invited her. She became she was an intern. And now she tells me that, look, it's not about always having a job to be able only eat. The purpose is important. The hope is important, that you feel even in this suppression, in this oppression that we all suffocating, that we're all suffering, there's something that I'm doing. There's something that I'm contributing. And I think the Taliban, what they deny to women of Afghanistan is this feeling of being able to be useful for your own society, to be able to contribute back as a human. Like they just are trying to use women as a mainly, like in the service of first, to be able to reproduce as a sex slaves, and also to keep them at the house. And as they treat women like domestic animals. And that should not be the way it should be happening. One thing that I really feel sad about is that we are not seeing that urgency in the media around us, in the media in the world. We are not seeing this urgency. Hey, world, please wake up. This is happening. We are living in the 21st century. We are living in 2022. There's a country that basically deny women the right to exist as human because they are women, because of their sex, because of their gender. How should we put this in another word to be able to get attention? So that is the part that I'm really, really feel, depressed about, to be able to just see this is happening. Because when I was reading Margaret Atwood's book about the Republic of Gilead, I was always thinking like, oh my God, but then I knew that happened in Afghanistan. But at that time, at least we know that there wasn't any social media. There wasn't any media reporting so much details about what's happening and about how Taliban are implementing their misogynist policies on women every day, cutting their human rights every day. We didn't have that stories coming up, but now we do have that stories, but the world still doesn't want to pay attention. There is no urgency of talking about, hey, this is not acceptable. This should not be acceptable. And we really hope for Zan Times. Zan means woman. And Zan Times is really our way of saying that this is our time. And the least we can do in our time is to speak our truth, to really say what is really happening, to be able to collect that stories, to preserve it, to put it somewhere for the next generation, that when they look back, they can judge us by the circumstances that we were living in. And also with that circumstances, how did women in Afghanistan resisted, how they did fight back for their rights. That is one important part of our story. And we really hope, and as long as we can, definitely we will move forward. But what we really hope is for the people of the world to show solidarity, to just came, and wherever they are in the world, I am sure they have some power to exert. They can go to their governments. They can really appeal, especially in the countries who have something to do with Afghanistan in the past 20 years. they have an additional responsibility to really look back and take their governments accountable for what's happening today in Afghanistan and the silence that we are witnessing. So I am hopeful that even despite all the hopelessness, despite all the suffering, the media, as we are seeing, they have survived so far, and they will survive. And hopefully, we will be able to provide an alternative, thinking space for the people of Afghanistan who are just losing this every, there is no art, there is no music, there is nothing left for the people. So we are trying to create an alternative space to be able to tell a story, as well as trying to create awareness about rights, about how it's necessary to advocate for equality for all. And that by itself is a rejection of the Taliban. And that is the story that we hope to tell. And we are hopeful that we can continue our work.